host of The Habit Architect. We're glad to have you here as usual. I'm excited about this guest today. We're going to have a good conversation. Before we do, I just want you to remind you to go back and watch some of our previous episodes, like them, follow them, subscribe on whatever podcast channel you get your information from, because that's really important to us as we continue to build this. And one of our guests, most recently, Chantel, actually wrote a book that's very similar in vein to this. She called it The Success Lie. Our guest today, Meg, we're going to have a great time, by the way, on this conversation. And I love this topic because what she talks about is the bad things about hustle culture. And we've all been in that case where, our boss or we just think we have to work harder to get more. And we feel like no matter what it is, we just need to do more of the same thing. Well, what if that same thing is the wrong habit and you're just pressing down and doing more, doubling down on the wrong thing? And I think a lot of people in business get to this point, particularly in sales and marketing, and that's Meg's expertise. So we're going to hear from that. She has got a concept that I love the name of it. It's called effortless abundance, because just think about those two words together makes us all very happy if you think about it. So I can't wait to ask her about that. So let's bring Meg on and get started with this episode. And while she's joining, a reminder, you can ask questions. If you're on LinkedIn, just type it into the video there, and as well as YouTube. So those two are live. Send us all the questions. Meg said beforehand when we talked that she would answer them all. So send them in. Meg, great to see you. Hello.
Hi, good morning. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too, from Mexico City as well. That's great to have a little international. We have Flora, our producer, in Argentina, you in Mexico City, and me in boring Dallas. So
Yeah, she was talking about how humid it is there, and I'm like, I would love a little humidity. We are in rainy season right now. A lot of people think Mexico is just hot and beautiful and sunny, and I'm like, no, it's Mexico City. We just have 6 months of rain every day,
yeah,
so
yeah,
dealing with
yeah.
it.
Well,
But you might hear the birds chirping. It's a good day.
yeah, it's a good day. Well, I'm glad to have you here. Why don't we start with an introduction? Give an introduction to yourself and what you do, and then we'll kind of dig into a lot of these topics. I'm fascinated by your practice here.
Yeah, and I really love the quick intro. So I'm Meg Misiak. I have spent 12 years basically building and scaling sales training programs. And in that, I basically have worked with helping salespeople grow from very junior roles like SDRs up to multi-million dollar salespeople.
Nice.
I've worked with a ton of top performers, and most of my experience is in SaaS.
Yeah.
This industry that is just like super known and probably at this point infamous for being very like burnout centric, hustle culture centric.
Yeah.
And I have always had a passion, even when I was in sales, for figuring out different ways of doing things. At first it was like, how do I like succeed as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And honestly, that led me to burning out myself. So I started my company almost 6 years ago, and I have been helping companies like HubSpot and Blend figure out the best way for their teams to sell. But a year ago, I turned something that was a passion project for me, which was coaching individual sales reps on very similar journeys I had of going, hitting burnout, kind of realizing like, wait, what am I doing? And then finding more sustainable ways to still be a top performer, but to
Yeah.
also have more balance and to find this what I love the mantra effortless abundance. Like how can we
Yes.
do the most success, the most living, but with the least effort and especially like the least waste.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly. And I want to dig into that. I'm excited about that. So my career started in sales 30 years ago, something like that. I don't want to say it out loud,
Yeah.
but you can tell by the gray hair. And it was interesting because it was very much the more you do, the more you'll be successful. And it was interesting because the sales training then, and I never really liked it. It was more about how do you manipulate the conversation, I think, as opposed to
Yeah.
what are we doing to meet the customer in the middle and be more successful. Now, over time, it's changed, and I know there's better programs and stuff like that. But if you think with those two things, I can still hear people saying, well, if you just make more phone calls or if you do this, you're going to be successful. And I watched and managed a lot of salespeople that wasn't the trigger that made them successful. It wasn't more that made them
Mhm.
successful. It was how they did what they were focused on more successful. And so I'm looking forward to that. But let's talk about the burnout, because I think that's a significant starting point for us, because we may have people listening to this that are feeling that way or had felt that way. And tell us a little bit about that journey, if you don't mind, because I think that's an important aspect of it.
Yeah, and before we dive into that, I actually just wanna highlight something you said that I resonate with so deeply. Even 30 years ago, the the cult of more in sales is so strong. 30 years ago, it might have been just more calls. For me, when I started in sales, it was literally knocking on more doors. I was
Mhm.
in the field. It was like more hours of NPR because
Yep.
I'm driving everywhere. And today, that is so interesting because I think the cult of more has shifted. We pretend like we're so efficient and we are so productive, but now it's more systems.
Yes.
People are using it like it's more systems, more data, more personalization, more this, more that.
Yep.
And it's so shocking because most of the work that I do is just helping people figure out how to like do less.
Yep.
And it's not more systems, it's not more data, even more personalization. I'm like, everyone's using personalization. It's not even differentiated at this point, and it's just
Exactly. Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
So I truly think like the focus and the strategy is what I see. The irony is that what you said, like when you look at the top performers, they're doing less, but they're doing like it's less waste and less action, but it's more strategy.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that is like truly the differentiator that I see.
Yeah.
And it relates to my own burnout story. And to be fair, I think a lot of people, when I reach out and I about burnout, they're like, "No, not me, not
Yeah.
burned out." So, but when I talk to people about hustle culture and about how they feel at work, that's when things start to shift. Um, I think fewer people actually hit a point of burnout, and for me, what that looked like, I mean, I was just chasing the corporate ladder, and I was climbing very quickly.
Yeah.
I literally just had this dream of, VP by 35, and, not that that really meant anything, it was just, the
Yeah.
corporate brainwashing, like, "I need to be better, I need to be more."
Yeah.
Um and it ended up like right before COVID hit, I literally was working multiple jobs because like they're like, "Oh, we'll hire people under your team." Um,
Mm.
I was growing a team for the first time after being like one team of one for years.
Yeah.
Um, but I at that point was working 70 to 80 hours per week. I literally would be in the office until like 1 AM. I
Hmm.
like was barely I'd like eat snacks in the office. I was back to back meetings all day long. And it felt exciting in that moment. Like I
Yeah.
was like, I'm building something, I'm doing something important.
Yeah.
Um, but I had been working so hard towards a certain goal, and, when COVID hit, like, they're like, we've done hiring freeze. We can't just, like, give you a promotion."
Right.
And I just had this point, uh, and I also helped to double the sales goal. Like, literally, I implemented a framework, the sales goal, best in case, doubled, and it was just all of this work and all of this very tangible. Like, I was a top performer, and I could prove it with numbers, and when I heard, like, my boss also said something very rude to me. He's like, "We don't just give away promotions."
Mm.
Something in me just cracked, and it was I had been taught my entire life that, like, you work hard and it pays off.
Yeah.
And I think in that moment, just something like that formula within me cracked, and it was just, like, existentially heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So I went home and I turned off the light, and I remember this so vividly. I went home and the sun was still out, and I realized I hadn't seen the sun, like, leaving work
Ah,
in over 2 years, and I
wow.
feel like something in me just, like, shut off, with that light bulb. I just went to sleep, and I think I slept for like 16 hours or something crazy, and I just felt so numb. But I ended up like literally taking time off of work for burnout, and
Yeah.
they I quit my job. They
Yeah.
ended up replacing me with 5 different people, and I have spent the entire time since then figuring out how to work differently.
Yeah.
And honestly realizing like there's a lot of, it's not only the external, it was so internal for me, and like
Yeah.
figuring out what points, what patterns, what even like childhood, how did my values like lead me to that point, and how can I now work differently?
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of habit building, a lot of therapy, and a lot of honestly just like struggling through it, learning, changing, and iterating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry that that happened to you, and I wish I could say that's a very unusual story. But there's probably a lot of people that have, when you say those words, they felt the same way. And the thing about the
Mhm.
sun, I think that's such an interesting statement because I was out walking this morning, like I do every morning now, and
Yeah.
I was thinking that fresh air does a lot for people. Even if you can just go outside and get fresh air in the middle of a day, and people don't do it. They don't, because they go into the office and they think they're in that hustle culture and we got to churn it out, work it out, have back-to-back meetings, all
Mhm.
that stuff. And it just makes you less productive. I mean, if you just kind of get out and take a deep breath of fresh air, and the sun, whatever it is, that alone is something that people should make sure that they build into their day. But that's just a small piece of it, obviously. But it just hit me when you said I didn't see the sun, because I remember weeks like that where I didn't, and same thing. So let's talk about, you hit on something there that I want to dig into. I'm so sorry you went through that, but I also think I'm glad you pulled out of it like you did, because now you're helping so many people. And you mentioned something about habits and values, and I do that a lot when I teach people about habits. If they're not tied to your values, they're not going to stick, right? They're not going to last, because it's not something that at your center you believe in. And so you talk about that a little bit. So how do you put that into practice, and how do you tie the values to production, right? Because you're still talking to salespeople. They're hired to sell whatever it is that they need to do. That's their role in the company. So how do you pull back that hustle culture and tie it to values? What's the mechanism there?
Ooh, yeah. And it's funny because with habit building, I think the habits that I have done and like the things that I told myself I like should do
Hmm.
never stuck,
Yeah.
right? And even yesterday I had a coaching call with a client. She was like, Meg, even from like the habit, I think like habits, so like I have a lot of even like habits around creativity and things like that. Literally,
Yeah.
all of my little bad art in my background. And she was like, how did you kind of like build those into a muscle? And like, how did you build an identity? Because also at some point, our habits become our identity.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
I literally told her, like, it started with values.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes not the values that I already had, but like values of almost like aspirational values. Like one year, I'm very big as well on kind of like year-long journeys and cycles of your life. And especially big like themes and mantras. I mean, I pull a tarot card of the year every year, like even like the devil was one, which goes into like a lot of habits. Um, but I do think that your values are so important to habit building. But the place where I meet a lot of reps are when performance is their core value.
Mm.
It is the thing in their life that they have prioritized so deeply, and it's almost like slowly breaking them. And they don't like come to
Yeah.
me and say this, but there's a lot of symptoms of this
Yeah.
where they say things like, I have been a top performer for so long. I've done it because I'm working, 12, 13-hour days.
Yeah.
Um, and they've noticed that things in their life have slowly started to deteriorate.
Oh yeah.
Such as like with this client, for example, she was saying that she used to be so passionate about craft nights. and
Yep.
she used to be super passionate about cooking, and she's still very passionate about, like, going out with her friends in terms of, like, paddleboarding and kayaking
Yeah.
and all these things, but she was like, "I just don't feel like my life is so revolved around work and performance right now."
Yeah.
And I think, like, a part of what I call, like, effortless abundance is realizing almost like that performance as a value
Yeah.
is will break you, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's almost like figuring out what values, how do you either it's reconnecting with things that used to be important to you, or it's also just realizing how, like, putting a taking a stand and being like, "Hey, my values are misaligned and I
Yeah.
feel it," whether it's not having enough time with your family, or a lot of people tell me, like, a lot of my clients are parents, and they're like, "I am even when I'm with my family, I'm thinking about work." And that's not the parent I wanna be, even
Yeah.
if you don't have kids like me, I'm, like, being more present with
Yeah.
my partner, and also just, like, having time for life.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
think, yeah, I'm so curious about your perspective on this, but, like, for me, it's interesting because, um, I think you can start with your values, or you can realize you can use aspirational values,
Yeah.
as, like,
Yeah.
I've realized that my habits are now misaligned, and a lot of the work that I do with people is realizing that, like, where figuring out where performance
Yep.
as a value comes from in their life, like a little sales therapy,
Yep.
because so many of us have been taught, like, what good balance looks like, and
Yeah.
honestly, a lot of it is not very good habits. So
No,
even
exactly.
kind of deconstructing
Yeah.
your perspectives and the habits that you learned. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, my parent just came home, super late every day," like, and I'm like, "Okay, cool. Do you want the life that, your parents were?" Even I mean, we love
Yeah.
our parents, hopefully, but I think a lot of people wanna do things differently, so it's
Yeah.
also just realizing, like, where do your values come from, and are you happy with them? Do they
Yep.
need a little, reconstruction? And where do you wanna lean into more with your values? Because truly, like, y how you live your life,
Yeah.
like, how you spend every single day is, like, truly who you are, and
Yeah.
a lot of people just have this moment of, like, "Wait, this is
Yeah.
not the life that I wanna live." And
Exactly.
that's where habits can come in.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit, but I want to
Yeah.
recognize there's a lot of people commenting. Julianne and Mary both love the thought of the sun and nature, said that that's so important when we were talking about that
Yeah.
earlier. So appreciate that. And then Paul says this is a perfect topic. So we're on topic, Meg. We're in the right spot here, it sounds like, to help people. So yeah, you
Yeah.
said a couple things there that I want to mention. I go back. My son was, gosh, I don't even know how old he was. Probably he was somewhere between 5 and 10. And my mom and dad and the family, we wanted to do a cruise, or they wanted to do a cruise. It was the last thing I thought I wanted to
Mhm.
do, and that was the wrong attitude. And I remember being on because we were trying to sell a software company. It wasn't quite ready. That had some holes in it, and you get on the cruise, and I was out of touch. And I remember sitting on that boat thinking, when are we going to get to somewhere I can get on the phone or get connected? And what a horrible thing. I think it was horrible for my family, but it's one of the biggest regrets of my life because I had an opportunity to do anything I wanted with my son. And instead, I was in the back of my mind, I was thinking about how are we going to get, sell this company? And it's just one of those things that we do get wrapped up in, and we don't realize the cause and effect. A
Mhm.
few years later, I was diagnosed with cancer, and were those related? I don't know, maybe, but I feel like there was something that was affecting my body that was because of the thoughts I was putting into it, or the thoughts that I
Mhm.
focused on. And that's why I agree with you. Values are wildly important. And when I ask somebody, when we start talking about their habits or
Mhm.
how they work and things like that, I say, what are your values? They always rattle them off really quickly. Family, work, family, wealth, health, whatever. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, one word values. So let's talk about that. What does family mean? And when you start digging into it and you say, and they start saying, well, I need to stop going to happy hour with my buddies at work. And I'm like, okay, so your value there is that you want to be with your buddies at work instead of your family, right? Because if family's your number one value, you're getting home to your family, not stopping by the bar after you spent 8 hours with these guys, right? And
Mhm.
and so it really, people really need to sit down and think about it. And I think there's a great exercise that I learned at the hierarchy of values is just start just write them down and then be honest with yourself and then ask, what are you doing to live that value? As opposed to just
Yes.
listing your values, but what are the actions that I can take to actually support that value, right? And what's interesting about what you're doing is I think it's fascinating that you're taking a performance culture in sales and you're saying, okay, if you still stick to your values, you're actually going to get abundance, and it's going to be less difficult to get there, right? Is it? Did I get
Yeah. And no, absolutely. And one thing that just resonated so deeply with what you said as well is a lot of people can rattle off their values, but for me, values are not just like the thing that you put on your in
Yeah,
your little notebook, but it's truly how you live, and it is habits.
yeah,
Because oof, and it hits because I think so many of us have had this experience of saying they value something, but I mean, even for me, like my relationship and my relationships with my family and my friends and my partner are so important to me. And so even every morning, like making sure that I spend quality time with my partner before I come into my little office,
yeah.
And sometimes it's so small, but like
Mhm.
these habits are things that really can transform your life. And so it's interesting because when we talk about performance, I I mean, I have also been raised in an environment where I was like, "Okay, you work hard and you just work harder than anyone else, and that
Yep,
is what will be make you successful."
yep,
But it sounds like you had a similar experience of, like, honestly, when I looked into top performance,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
That the people that are working the hardest and just doing the same I mean, it's like the definition of insanity, right? It's like
Exactly,
doing
exactly.
the same thing over and over.
Yeah,
The people that I work with that are, like, the top performers, they're doing things differently.
yep,
And, one thing that is so cool because like, the way that I work with people, one of the first exercises I do pretty consistently is what I call, like, a sales archetype workshop, where
mhm.
instead of talking
I
about
like it.
what do you wanna do? What habits do you wanna integrate? We
That's
actually
good.
start from a place of values,
Yeah,
but I actually talk about, like, how I use Jungian archetype if you're
mm,
familiar, but there are things like I have a magician tattoo of my, like, archetype, um, but we talk about how do you wanna show up?
yep,
And I don't mean just, like, what it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, like, it's hard to integrate a habit if you don't know the why behind it. And so
yeah,
how I really integrate the why is by choosing this archetype. And like some people are the sage where it's like
yeah,
using wisdom and doing things from like, helping people see things differently based on your experience. Some people are the hero and they're literally like
yeah.
one of my clients is the heart-centric hero, and it's very much at work as well as in his personal life.
Nice.
He's like, no matter how tired I am, I'm going to be the dad. He has like
Yeah,
several little girls running around, and he's like, "I'm always the dad who, like, no matter how tired I am, no matter, like, what's going on, I will show up. I will be
yeah,
at every game. I will be, like, I will be at every parent-teacher conference." And,
mhm,
figuring out what this, like, energetic archetype
yep,
is for you can be really beautiful because it's not just like, "Okay, I wanna be" I wanna focus on my family. I think we can kinda get lost in all of the different things,
yep,
but if you choose an archetype that truly, like, embodies all the different values in your life,
yeah.
it makes it easier.
Yeah, and I like that because having managed sales teams as well, and there was
Mhm.
always this kind of natural jealousy, I think is the right word for it. And they'd say that Meg is top performer. Oh, she got all the good accounts. I'm like, mm, that's not how it works, right? It's not that you were just given great accounts. You worked them in a way that made them great accounts, right?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing though because we talked earlier about hustle culture, and then you talk about values, and it dawned on me that what hustle culture is about is changing your values, right? It's telling you that the value you had about being dad, or the heart lead with heart, that's not your value. Your value in hustle culture is do more, do more, do more, and do it repeatedly and do it without a break and all that stuff. And so it's an interesting, I really like that connection that you just made for me, at least, about
Yeah.
how it's separating your values, which makes you half the person, I think, or whatever you want, whatever percentage you
Yeah.
want to say. And so if you're half the person doing that job repetitively, you're not doing it as best you can, right? It's just not the way it works.
Yeah. And it is really hard because when we think about why, like, why is household culture a thing? And like, why does I call it like the cult of more
Hmm.
because it's pretty culty. And it is, there's just this like almost like the realm of hungry ghosts
Yeah,
in sales where it's just like wanting all like even when I work with people, they're always looking. Maybe sometimes at first they're like, what's the newest and greatest thing? What's this and what's that? And I'm like, it is not the magic bullet. There's no quick and easy. A lot of it is just like going back to the basics and also realizing that sales is literally just basic psychology and human connection.
yeah,
But I think the interesting thing about people in sales is it's such a beautiful opportunity for people who are so hungry for success and
hmm,
validation
yeah,
and are willing to work really hard to achieve it. And especially, what I find is like, I mean, sometimes my clients open up to me the very first call. Sometimes, like, I literally work for
yeah,
clients who kind of open up to me about some of the spiritual roots of why they are working so hard, like years later.
yeah,
I literally have one of my clients who grew up in a cult-like religious environment. I have veterans. I have even people who had a pretty good childhood, but like, were seen as like lesser than,
yeah,
like the sibling that wasn't really as good in school or this or that. And not to, you know,
yeah,
trauma is all relative, but I find this there is a trend
yeah,
and maybe I'm just biased because, like, I work in sales and I see everyone in sales, and it's probably everyone. But I think that sales does attract a certain type of person who is hungry
yeah,
for like that, like, and is willing to put so much work into it. And the issue is that the sales industry, like, oh, it is a trauma bond with people like that. It's so easy to just like break.
yep, yeah,
But yeah, what I found is, the people who do end up having, like, a ton of success, like, there's 2 versions of that. There's the
yeah,
people who do turn into like, we've talked about even, like, those parents who literally just, like, go to work all day and then have to, like, go out for drinks with their coworkers because they have to, like, they're so on and they're
yeah, yeah,
dysregulated, like, "Oh, I need to." It's like, okay, is it really actually about having, fun with your coworkers, or is it just because 'cause you've been have so much coffee every single day that you're just like, I need to numb from the stress, or I need to,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
come
yeah,
down from all the caffeine, and so also just realizing that, I think sales is a place where more is and, like, seeking more
yeah,
is so deep within our souls, and people are willing to really put in that work, but it's also interesting because from a sales leadership environment, I don't know what you've seen, but what I've seen is that it's easier to have more as a strategy than have better as a
yeah,
strategy.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
then you have to actually admit that some things are broken, you have to,
yeah,
like,
yep,
train people, and if we actually just say, "Hey, the people who actually succeed are the people who just work harder,"
yeah,
that's a hell of a lot easier, and it actually, like, that's not leadership, that's literally just, like,
yeah.
burning people out. Do you
Exactly,
see
and
any of that?
yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you on that. So, and I realize we're down at the half hour, which we try to go 30 to 45 minutes, and I could talk to you for hours. But let's talk a little bit about how you do it. So, somebody calls you, an
Yep,
individual or a sales manager that has a team of 5, 10, whatever. What's the process that you go through? And you mentioned the archetype, so maybe
mhm.
that's where we've already talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, honestly, I would say a lot of times where I start is figuring out people's why.
Mm.
right? We talked, we actually, this has been such a common thread through this conversation. It's the easier to build habits if you have a very clear why, or even like why not. So when I first start working with people, we talk about their goals. And even for example, some of my clients are looking to build a personal brand, because they want to like do consulting after, and so like that's a very strong why, which is like financial freedom and being able to like live the way they want, to like build a business so they can have more time with their family. They're not like working for, so very, very strong why.
Hey, just a minute.
Okay.
There's so
So
many people commenting. I just want you to know, as you
yeah,
continue,
oh good.
Paul and Guy have talked about, burnout is real, very good insights, getting a lot out of this. I just want you to
Yeah.
be encouraged because there's some good
Uh,
feedback.
I think like a lot of it, like, these are the conversations we don't have that often because, there's also a lot of gaslighting where it's like,
Yeah.
if I don't succeed, it's just me as the issue.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that, making this shift can start with some small actions, but for me, you
Mhm.
have to start with the why. So even I could just tell people like, hey, post every day.
Yeah.
But unless we connect it to that why, um, it a lot of times is very harder. It's a lot harder to just
Yeah.
actually do it. The other thing a lot of times I help with, like I do a lot of audits to figure out like, what is their why, but also when I say the why not,
Mm.
um, what I find with habit building is sometimes like people are literally so maxed out. It doesn't start with adding habits, but it starts with subtracting things that are not working. So
Right.
for example, even if I'm like, hey, what is one meeting you can take off of your calendar?
Exactly.
Because before you like,
Yes.
yeah. And I mean, also when we study things like addiction, and I don't mean just like, alcoholism or,
Yeah.
using, but what I mean is even like a lot of times our addiction can be to work and to
Yep.
more and to like hustle. And
Yep.
when you treat it like an addiction, when you study addiction, a lot of people like think that they can just like some people can just go cold turkey, but a lot of times what works most is replacing the addiction with something else. I read this amazing book and it said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection.
Yep.
And so I
Absolutely.
think like, yeah, when you think about these habits as something not that you can just like add on. Oh, I'm just
Yep.
gonna like wake up earlier. Okay, maybe you need to go to bed sooner as a first
Exactly.
step.
Exactly.
So like what can you take out before you add in? And how can you have that really strong why behind you? Because if you don't, then like it's never gonna stick.
Yeah.
And I think there one final thought on that is that like a lot of my clients are such high performers that there's just this very big trend I see where they want to like literally completely change their lives in like a
Oh, wow.
week.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know about you, but I see it with habit building as well because people are like,
Oh, yeah.
"Okay, I wanna, like, do this and do that, et cetera," and I think it's a very common
Yeah.
and, like, part of my coaching is when they're like, "I'm so sorry I didn't do everything that you asked, like, I didn't do the 500 things,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Okay,
Cool.
now we can get to the real stuff,"
Yeah.
because for me, when it comes to discipline is mostly, like it actually is just, like, if it's not working, we just need to go back and, like, simplify a little bit.
Yep.
Let's just start with one thing, and until we can do that consistently,
Yeah.
we shouldn't add anything, or we actually might need to subtract.
Yeah.
So
By
a
the way,
lot of it is just like figuring out like what needs to be added, but also especially like we talk about from like all the things you're doing, the cult of more,
yeah.
sometimes it's actually subtraction.
Yeah, well, and I think that's very important. And I want to spend a minute on that because that is absolutely the biggest thing. Is I see it all
Mhm.
the time. People say they want to run a marathon, but they're trying to fit it into their same schedule. It's not possible. You just can't.
No.
I mean, physics doesn't work that way, right? And so but the subtraction is a big thing because there are so many. When I started digging into it more, I started realizing the number of meetings on our calendars and I hate that it became a meme. That couldn't this have been an email? That little saying, because it's
Uh-huh.
so true. It's so true. There's so many meetings we sit on that are an hour that could have been 45 minutes, or could have been 30 minutes, or could have been 15 minutes, or an email. It just. I mean, we need to start thinking about this. But I think that hustle culture also has this thing that how many meetings are you in? And I mean, even though you're not counting them, what's the biggest bravado thing to say? Oh, I've been on back-to-back meetings all day. Well,
Yeah.
So you haven't been productive all day, is what you're saying. You know, it really, I really resonate with what you just said there about take away something before you add something, and
Yeah.
when you add something, it hopefully is more valuable than what you taken away, right? And it's just got to be that
Mhm.
way. And I understand the connection piece is big, and it is to some degree, and I know this won't be a popular saying among hardcore salespeople, but it's putting humans back in the role, right? As opposed to kind of the robots. I mean, yes, you can
Yeah.
use the automations to help you do more, but you got to still be a human in the role. Otherwise, you're just like you said, everybody looks the same, I think.
Yeah, and I definitely see so much of, like, busy as a badge of honor,
Yep.
and it's interesting because those are the people that when I meet with them, they feel the most unfulfilled
Yeah.
because the things that are filling their life are it's almost like empty calories at
Exactly.
work,
Yes. Yes.
you
That's a great way to
know?
put it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and, they're so busy and then they get home and they just, like, kinda crash, or they
Yeah.
can't crash, they can't sleep because 'cause they're so anxious and they can't turn off. And, when you think about living a better life and being more present and truly, like, living a better life, I just mean, like, what does that mean to you? Whether you want a lot of times it's freedom, a lot of times it's family, a lot of times it's even, like, hobbies and interests and knowing yourself,
Yeah.
and enjoying the time that you have outside of work. It really does a lot of times start with reflecting on how you're spending your time currently and
Yeah.
realizing that, like, you cannot keep doing that if you want to live differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, we got some great comments.
So
Millie
good.
says, yes, Megan, make space for the magic. Love the calling out the why not. Hugo, very insightful. This is good about small daily habits. And Guy, Atomic Habits talks a little bit about this. So it's all good
Yeah, it
comments
does.
and people paying attention. Empty calories. I hadn't thought about that. There's got to be an equivalent word for the work that we do. And I was thinking maybe it's empty inputs. You're sitting on a meeting and you're not getting value out of it. So it's not really helping you do your job better and stuff like that. But I love that analogy is real. So, um,
Yeah.
if we talked a little bit about getting started, so somebody reaches out to you, is it individuals and teams, or I know you said you're helping individuals now, but you still doing both?
Yeah, so, I actually do work with teams as well. I actually am, an expert on deal qualification and the MEDDIC framework and was like, will just, make sense to salespeople to know it, but I still do train for teams. Even, I'm currently planning like a mid-year on-site for a sales team where they want to figure out, like, we're doing that archetype workshop of how do the salespeople wanna show up.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely leading a little bit more with a little bit more magic and a little bit more fulfillment based, which is amazing. I'm like, we live in a weird time where, finding those sales teams that are interested in doing things differently. But the
Yeah.
majority of work I do now, I changed my business a year ago, and so I do work with one-on-one salespeople. And we work on, yes, sales mastery. So a lot of those tactics that can help you basically work smarter, not harder. I do work on the time management side of a lot of what we talked about today, habit
Yep.
building, etc. And then the third bucket, I call, fulfillment, but I also call it sales therapy of like,
Yep.
how can we recognize the patterns and the mindsets that contribute to those other areas? Because it's so energetic, and a lot of times it's not just the external work, but it's the internal work as well.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah,
again, Guy, I wanted to mention there's also another book out there called Time Bandit you can read that I wrote, and I love Atomic Habits. It actually inspired me too. So what Guy said, but what I kind of talk
yeah,
about is priority values, priorities, and habits, kind of how they work together and stuff like that. So, Guy, if you choose to do that, it did hit Amazon bestseller. So anyway, I wanted to acknowledge that. That's fantastic. I love that you I don't want to use the word pivot because you didn't, but you added the element of individual one-on-one coaching. I think that's incredibly important for sales
yeah,
team, so salespeople. Sales leaders should encourage their salespeople to get one-to-one mentoring because it will make them so much better. I always did that. I always encouraged the reps to find ways that they could make themselves better, not just how to do more, but how to make themselves better at certain skills and
yeah.
life skills, all that stuff. I think that's very powerful. I'm glad you're doing that. How do people find you? I mean, we've got a ticker going. LinkedIn is probably the best way, but what's another way what's the best way to reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, so I am obsessed with LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn. So I actually have a newsletter called Letters to My Burned Out Self,
Oh,
which I just
nice. I love it.
pour my heart into. Yeah, so we cover everything from authenticity to a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, like even like my burnout story. But that's honestly, if you're feeling any of this, I would highly encourage you to check that out. And if you are a salesperson that wants to explore a little bit more investment, in some of these things, because what I find, like why I started working with individuals is like I just, the individual work and the internal work is so important to me. And a
Yeah.
lot of times that's not what you're getting from the
Yeah.
training that, like the product training, all of that. So if you
Yeah.
want to check that out, I actually have a link on my website in my featured section to book
Oh,
a
good.
consult with me. It's never any pressure, but yeah, pure magic.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Meg, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to have you again. And maybe I'd love
Yeah,
to do some
fun.
like a live Q&A session. I think it would be a great thing. And if we could get a group of salespeople that feel that burnout coming, that would be a wonderful thing for us to collaborate on. But I so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
And
and
go ahead.
oh my gosh, Cups, like I'm so excited as well because I'm really excited to read your book before the next session we do because I feel like so often, even like I love Atomic Habits, but I don't know about you, like I'm like, raise your hand if you read Atomic Habits and still struggle, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I think that what you're doing with like incorporating values into it, oof, I'm like
Yeah.
so excited to read it and to dig in.
Oh yeah, please do. It's a quick read, but yeah. And I also just launched a priority matrix that helps people too.
Ah,
So
cool.
we'll make
Yeah.
sure that that's in the chat. But I think that people do challenge with it because we are busy. Life is busy, in sales or
Yeah.
outside of sales. It's just busy. There's so many things coming at us that the more we can put that filter up that focuses on what match align with our values will be better. And you're teaching that, and I applaud you for that. So just keep it up, Meg.
Yes, you too. Such
All
a good
right.
conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. We do try to commit to getting these done in 45 minutes. Do go back and watch it because I think Meg had some incredible comments to share with us. And so, if you got something out of it, do share the podcast with your friends so they can hear what Meg spoke about. It's all very good. Very good to see you and nice to meet you, everybody. Join us next week. I don't know who our guest is. To be honest with you, I should. I didn't check that beforehand. Flora will kill me. But it'll be a good guest. We've had a great run of guests, and Meg, you're up there. You're one of them. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.